What if I told you that Native Americans knew secrets about protecting themselves from rain that surpass many modern technologies? They didn't have membrane fabrics or synthetic coatings that you can buy in a store. Their laboratory was nature itself, and their tools were observation and thousands of years of experience accumulated by generations. They knew how to read the landscape and use the materials the earth provided, turning bark, hides, and even smoke into reliable protection from the elements. Their dwellings were not just shelters, but complex systems that breathed, drained water, and retained heat. These methods were not primitive. They were incredibly effective and environmentally friendly, based on a deep respect for the surrounding world. Indigenous peoples understood that to protect themselves from nature, they did not need to fight it, but rather become part of it. They used what was available to them and did so with remarkable ingenuity. Their solutions were simple, but it was in this simplicity that their genius lay. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how to stay dry in the middle of a rainstorm using only tree bark, campfire smoke, and smart plants from the nearest swamp. Are you ready to learn the truth about why the classic Native American shelter, known as a teepee, was the perfect home during a rainstorm? Its secret lies not only in its shape, but also in the complex management system that the inhabitants of the plains perfected. It was not just a shelter, but a living organism that responded to the weather. Let's start with the most obvious detail, the conical shape. Thanks to the steep slope of the walls, rainwater had no chance of lingering on the surface. It rolled down instantly, without having time to seep through the covering. Unlike flat or gently sloping roofs, this design completely eliminated the possibility of leaks due to moisture accumulation. The covering itself was made of carefully processed hides. These hides were sewn together and covered a frame made of long poles. An important point was the processing of this material, which made it waterproof. We will talk about this in more detail in the next chapter, but it was the quality of the covering that was the first barrier to rain. However, the outer layer was only half the battle. Inside the Tipi, a special lining known as an ozon was installed. This was a second inner wall made of skins that ran around the perimeter of the dwelling and rose to human height. It performed two critically important functions during rain. The first function of the ozon was to combat condensation. When a fire was burning inside and it was cold and damp outside, moisture inevitably formed on the inner surface of the main covering. The lining caught these droplets, preventing them from dripping onto people and belongings. The water simply flowed down the ozon onto the ground. The second function of the lining was to create draft. The ozon did not reach the floor, leaving a gap. Cold air from the street entered under the outer edge of the Tipi, passed upward between the two layers of skins, and rushed toward the smoke hole. This created constant air circulation, which dried out any moisture. The most ingenious element was the smoke valves, two wings at the top of the teepee, which were controlled by special poles. During rain, the inhabitants could precisely adjust their position. They were turned to close the opening from the wind and rain, but at the same time leave a gap for the smoke to escape. This required constant attention and skill. The bottom of the dwelling was also protected. The covering of the teepee did not just lie on the ground, but was pressed down tightly with stones or special wooden pegs. This prevented wind and rainwater from penetrating from below. An almost airtight yet breathable capsule was created. Often, a shallow drainage groove was dug around the inner perimeter of the teepee. Any water that got inside or ran down the ozon did not spread throughout the living space. It collected in this groove and drained into a specially dug small well, where it was absorbed into the ground. Thus, the teepee was not just a tent, but a complex engineering system. Its conical shape, double-layered walls, controlled ventilation, and drainage worked together. They created a dry and comfortable space even in the heaviest downpour. How important do you think such active management of the dwelling was compared to modern homes, where everything is automated? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to learn more about the technologies of the past. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the Great Plains craftsmen. How did they make leather waterproof without a single drop of chemicals? Ordinary untreated leather has a serious drawback. When it gets wet, it stretches and becomes soft, and when it dries, it shrinks, turning into a hard and brittle material. It would be impossible to live in a teepee covered with such leather. The secret lay in a two-stage process: tanning and smoking. The first stage transformed the raw hide into soft, elastic suede that no longer hardened after getting wet. Special emulsions were used for this, which softened the fibers and made the material durable. It was hard and time-consuming work that required great skill. After this process was complete, the hide was soft but not yet waterproof. It absorbed water like a sponge. This is where the most important stage began: smoking. It was the smoke that gave the material its final, magical properties. For smoking, the prepared skin was stretched on a frame or sewn into a bag. It was placed over a specially prepared fire. It was important that it was not an open fire, but thick, smoldering smoke. For this, they used not dry firewood, but rotten, punk wood. This thick and relatively cool smoke permeated the skin through and through. The chemicals contained in the smoke reacted with the fibers of the material. What happened was what we would today call cross-linking of collagen fibers. This process made the structure of the skin more stable. As a result of this treatment, the hide acquired a characteristic golden brown hue. But more importantly, it became hydrophobic, meaning it began to repel water. Raindrops no longer absorbed into the material, but rolled off it like a modern raincoat. This process also made the skins much more resistant to rot and decay. The smoke acted as a preservative, protecting the material from bacteria and mold in wet weather. This was critical to the longevity of a dwelling that served a family for years. Smoking was carried out on both sides to ensure even impregnation. The process was slow and required constant monitoring. It was necessary to maintain the correct temperature and smoke density so as not to damage the material and achieve the desired result. It was from these smoked, water-resistant skins that the coverings for the teepees were sewn. They did not get wet, did not deform after rain, and did not rot. This technology was the pinnacle of the leatherworking skills of the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains. Was it difficult to master such material processing skills? Now that we know how dwellings were protected on the plains, are you ready to learn which plant material from the eastern forest was better than any leather? In the next chapter, we will reveal this amazing secret. What I am about to show you seems impossible. How did plants from the swamp become a waterproof shield? While skins ruled the plains in the eastern forest region, especially among the peoples who lived near the Great Lakes, the main material was reed or cattail. They wove special mats from it, which covered the frames of dome-shaped dwellings, wigwams. These mats were a marvel of engineering. They were made by the women of the tribe, and it was painstaking work. They collected long cattail leaves at the end of summer when they reached maximum strength. The leaves were then dried and sorted. The weaving process itself was a complex art. The leaves were sewn or woven together using strong threads made from plant fibers, such as the inner bark of linden trees. The mats were made large so that they could cover a significant part of the wigwam frame. But the main secret of these mats was not in the weaving, but in the material itself. Cattail leaves have a porous, cellular structure. When the mat was dry, thousands of microscopic gaps remained between the fibers. In dry and warm weather, these gaps provided ideal ventilation. Air circulated freely through the walls, keeping the interior cool. The wigwam literally breathed, which was very comfortable in the summer heat. But everything changed as soon as it started to rain. The cattail fibers began to absorb moisture, and here a smart mechanism came into play. As they absorbed water, the fibers swelled. They increased in volume, filling all the microscopic gaps in the weave. As a result of this process, the mat became completely waterproof. The porous, breathable wall turned into a monolithic shield that did not let a single drop of moisture through. Water simply rolled off the smooth surface of the swollen leaves. If you think this technology of using the natural properties of the material is truly ingenious, like this video. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about bark is outdated? For the peoples of the North and Northeast, such as the Cree and the Iroquois, there was a material that was stronger, lighter, and more durable than any other. We are talking about the bark of the paper birch. It was a true natural high-tech material that we are only beginning to appreciate today. The secret of birch bark lies in its unique chemical composition. It contains a substance called betulin, a natural wax. This wax makes the bark incredibly waterproof, flexible, and resistant to decay. In fact, it is a natural analog of modern plastic or rubber. The bark was harvested in spring or early summer when the sap was flowing. At this time, it was most elastic and easily separated from the trunk. Craftsmen made neat cuts and removed the bark in large intact pieces. It is very important that, when harvested correctly, this did not harm the tree. Only the outer, white layer of bark was removed. The inner layer, the cambium, remained intact, and the tree continued to live and grow. This was an example of sustainable use of resources. The resulting layers of bark were surprisingly strong and flexible. They could be bent, twisted, and most importantly, sewn together. Thin, strong spruce roots, which were pre-soaked for flexibility, were used for sewing. The peoples of the eastern forests and the subarctic used these layers of bark to make almost everything, but its main use was for roofing. Large sheets of birch bark were laid on the frames of wigwams and longhouses, creating a completely dry roof. The bark was laid like tiles in several layers. The seams between the sheets were carefully stitched with roots. Such a roof did not let a single drop of rain through and served for many years without needing to be replaced. It's amazing how one natural material could serve so many different purposes, isn't it? But one material was not enough to cover a house as large as an Iroquois longhouse. In the next chapter, you will learn how proper installation made the roof impenetrable. The material itself, whether bark, skins, or mats, did not guarantee dryness. The key was the method of installation. Native Americans, especially builders of longhouses and wigwams, mastered the principle of shingling, or layering. This method is based on a simple law of physics. Water always flows down under the force of gravity. Take, for example, the Iroquois longhouse. It was a huge structure covered with large slabs of bark, usually elm or oak. These slabs were heavy and not as flexible as birch bark. The secret to laying them was strict sequence. Roof construction always began with the bottom row at the eaves. The first row of bark slabs was laid on the frame and secured. Then the next row was laid, which went higher up the slope of the roof. The most important point was that each upper row of slabs was laid overlapping the lower one. Water flowing down the upper sheet fell onto the surface of the lower sheet and continued its movement downwards towards the ground. It simply had no chance of getting into the joint. The same principle was followed for the side joints. The slabs in one row were also laid overlapping each other. The entire roof was a continuous scale that directed water flows in one safe direction. No nails were used to fasten these slabs. Instead, an outer frame of thinner poles was pressed against the laid bark. This outer frame was securely tied to the main frame of the house with flexible ropes made of plant fibers. The genius of this method lay in its simplicity and flawless understanding of the laws of nature. Instead of trying to create a monolithic barrier, the builders created a system that controlled the flow of water and safely diverted it away from the living space. The secret that people pay thousands for today? How to create the perfect waterproof adhesive from what lies underfoot. Even with the most careful laying of bark sheets or sewing of skins, there were still seams, joints, and holes from the stitching. These small gaps were the main gateways for water during heavy rain. A reliable sealant was needed to combat them. The ideal solution was found in the forest. Indigenous peoples throughout North America used the resin of coniferous trees, most often pine or spruce, as a universal waterproof adhesive. But it was not just pure resin. Pure resin, although sticky, has its drawbacks. In cold weather, it becomes brittle and cracks, and in hot weather, it melts and flows. To turn it into the perfect sealant, a complex recipe was required, which was passed down from generation to generation. First, the resin was collected from trees and slowly melted over low heat. It was important not to let it boil or catch fire. It was a delicate process that required patience and attention. Then a filler was added to the melted resin. Most often, it was finely ground charcoal taken from a cooled fire. The charcoal made the mixture thicker, stronger, and more resistant to cracking in the cold. But even that was not enough. To give the mixture elasticity and prevent it from melting in the sun, a third component was added: fat. This component acted as a plasticizer, making the final product flexible and durable. The result was a thick, black, viscous mass. This composition was a real natural superglue. It had the perfect balance of stickiness, strength, and elasticity, retaining its properties in all weather conditions. Can you imagine how many observations and experiments were required to create such a simple but effective composition? But even the best sealant and the strongest roof won't save you if you set up camp in the wrong place. In the next chapter, we'll learn why choosing the right location was more important than the shelter itself. The first and most important trick to staying dry had nothing to do with the materials or construction of the shelter. It was all about choosing the right location for the camp or village. A mistake in this choice could negate all the efforts to build the best shelter. The main rule that all indigenous peoples knew was, never set up camp in a low-lying area. Valleys, ravines, and hollows might seem attractive because of their protection from the wind, but during heavy rain, they turned into natural channels for water runoff. A camp in such a place could be flooded in a matter of minutes. An experienced nomad or village builder always looked for high ground. It did not necessarily have to be a high hill. A small ridge, a terrace above a river, or simply a gentle slope was sufficient. The main thing was that the terrain had a natural slope. Being on high ground made sure that rainwater would flow away from the dwelling, not toward it. This solved the problem of flooding and dampness on the floor. Even during the heaviest downpour, the water just flowed around the camp. Dried-up riverbeds, which are so common on the Great Plains and in the Southwest, posed a particular danger. These places, which seemed like ideal flat areas for a camp, were deadly traps. A sudden downpour in the mountains, even tens of kilometers away, could cause instant flooding. The direction of the prevailing winds was also taken into account when choosing a location. Dwellings, especially Tipi with their smoke vents, were always placed so that the entrance was on the leeward side. This protected the entrance from direct rain and gusts of wind. Trees also played an important role. A dense forest could serve as an excellent windbreak, which weakened the force of the downpour. However, it was not advisable to set up camp directly under large, old trees that could collapse during a storm. The dwelling provided protection from the rain while stationary, but people needed to move around, hunt, and work in the open air. This required personal protection from the rain. Here, too, Native Americans demonstrated remarkable ingenuity by creating simple and effective rain gear. On the Great Plains, warriors and hunters often wore a cape made from a single well-tanned hide. This cape was simply thrown over the shoulders. For better protection from the water, it was worn with the fur on the outside. This may seem illogical, but the secret was that when the fur got wet, it became matted and created a dense, water-repellent layer. Water rolled off the fibers without penetrating the skin. At the same time, the inside of the skin remained dry and warm. In the eastern forest regions, where large animals were not so abundant, capes were often made from other materials. There were woven cloaks made from plant fibers, such as nettles or bast. The dense weave also provided some protection from moisture. The most luxurious and effective were cloaks covered with feathers. The feathers were laid overlapping, like tiles, and woven into the woven base. Thanks to the natural fats covering the feathers, such a cloak was almost completely waterproof. The design of such clothing was as simple as possible. Often it was just a rectangular piece of material or skin. The main thing was the quality of the material itself, its ability to repel water. The advent of European fabrics, such as woolen cloth, initially seemed to be an advantage. However, in heavy rain, wool quickly became wet, incredibly heavy, and took a very long time to dry. In this respect, properly treated hides were much more practical. Hunters or warriors caught in a storm did not always have the opportunity to return to their permanent dwellings. In such situations, it was necessary to build a temporary shelter, and it had to be done very quickly, using only what was at hand. The most common and effective such shelter was a simple canopy, or lean-to. The design of the canopy was ingenious in its simplicity. It did not require complex connections or rare materials. The base was a single horizontal crossbar, which was either placed on two low trees or supported by two forks stuck into the ground. Then a series of poles were leaned against this crossbar at an angle. The result was a single sloping wall roof. The entire structure was open on one side and closed on the other. The key point is correct orientation. The canopy was always built so that its solid, sloping wall faced the wind and rain. This was the back of the shelter, which took the brunt of the elements. The open, living side faced the opposite direction, away from the wind. A fire was lit directly in front of this open part. This layout created a surprisingly effective system. The sloping roof not only protected from rain, but also acted as a heat reflector. The heat from the fire hit the sloping surface and reflected down onto the sleeping people. This allowed them to stay warm and dry quickly, even at very low temperatures. The roof itself was covered with whatever was available. First, a layer of large branches was laid down. Then smaller branches, pine needles, grass, or large pieces of bark were placed on top of them. Even in the best dwellings, prolonged rain caused dampness problems. Water could seep in from wet clothing, enter through the entrance and exit, or simply condense on the walls. Therefore, staying dry meant not only not getting wet, but also being able to dry quickly. The first line of defense against dampness on the floor was proper organization. Floors in Native American dwellings were rarely just bare earth. They were often covered with a layer of dry grass, branches, or reed mats. This bedding created an air gap between the body and the cold, damp ground. It acted as an insulator and absorbed any accidental drops. This bedding could be easily replaced with dry bedding when it became damp. In many cultures, especially in the plains and in the Iroquois longhouses, sleeping areas were raised above the floor. These were special platforms or platforms made of poles. Sleeping on such a platform ensured that a person would stay dry, even if the earthen floor was damp. As already mentioned, a drainage groove was often dug around the perimeter of the teepee. It intercepted any water running off the walls or lining and prevented it from spreading throughout the living space. It was a simple but very effective internal drainage system. A key element in combating moisture was a constant fire. The fire in the center of the dwelling was not only a source of heat and light, but also a powerful air dryer. It created a draft that pulled moist air out through the smoke hole. Above the fire in each dwelling, there was always a drying system. These were poles or frames suspended from the ceiling. Wet clothes, moccasins, and equipment were hung on them. We have looked at just 10 tricks from the vast arsenal of knowledge that Native Americans used to protect themselves from the rain. We can see that it was a whole science based on thousands of years of observation and a deep understanding of nature. Every decision, from choosing a place to camp to chemically treating hides with smoke, was part of a unified, well-thought-out survival system. Suggest your topics in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss our next explorations of the amazing knowledge and practices that have allowed people to survive in the harshest conditions for millennia.